All right, so continuing with our discussion of the animals, specifically bilaterians. Zooming into the protostomes and continuing with our non-molting protostomes, the Lophotrochozoa. We are now getting into one of our major phyla of the Lophotrochozoa. So second only in size in terms of diversity compared to the mollusca. We've got the phylum Annelida. And these are sometimes called segmented worms. Segmented worms. And the name Annelida means little ring, for reasons that we will get into when we draw kind of our most familiar annelid, which are earthworms. Night crawlers, same basic idea there. Okay, so within the Annelida, historically I've taught this as being 3 different classes, but modern phylogenetics has suggested that the oligochaetes are really part of the polychaetes, and the Hyridinia might actually be a separate and distinct class. But I'm just going to talk about the polychaetes as being their own class, and the oligochaetes, or the earthworms, as being a distinct class. But you might learn something different further down the line, so I'm just preparing you for that. Polychaetes means many bristles. So one of the synapomorphies of the annelids, which is lost in the leeches, is having bristles called chaetae or setae. And then within the polychaetes, we have 2 major groups. Well, I guess now 3 if you include the oligochaetes. But we'll just say 2 major groups. The Aurantia are modal or moving polychaetes. And that includes things like the Pololo worm. And I put something in the lecture video series about the Pololo worms. These are the worms that are found throughout the Pacific Ocean, where in certain Pacific islands, they are known for coming out during the full moon in towards the end of the year, October, November, for mass breeding sessions, essentially. All the Pololo worms come out, and it's their breeding time. And the humans know this, and so they will go out and they will collect the Pololo worms and eat them. Okay, so within the Pololo worms, they have this phenomenon called epitoky. What does that mean? Well, it's very similar to something that we've seen before that I will draw for you again. So we have a segment at the front that's called the atoke, which is, it's pretty much the head end of the organism. And attached to the atoke, try trying to draw them kind of as elongate hexagons because that's how I've been led to believe they look. And they just kind of go on and on and on. These are segments known as epitokes, and they are fuel of gametes. I believe, I'm not sure, I believe that these are dioecious, so they're male and female pololo worms. I'm not entirely certain. But during these full moons, they will swim up and they will release these epitokes, and that's what folks like on the island of Samoa will collect and eat either raw there on the beach or take them home and cook them up and eat them. And you might be like, ew, gross, eating worms. But hey, it is a great source of protein. If you live on a small island, protein sources may be few and far between. And if that's what you grew up with, you know, they don't come to your house and say, ew, you're eating this or that. So we shouldn't say that about them. But anyway, this is one type of modal polychaete, the pololo worm. We also have the sedentaria, which are sessile or not moving polychaetes. So one example, and I'm going to draw the burrow of a lugworm. Lugworm is in the genus Arenicola. Arenicola is the Latin word, has Latin word roots that means sand-loving. So the burrow is U-shaped. And lugworms typically will live inside of this and they will have a head end of their burrow and they will have a tail end of their burrow. Basically, they'll live their whole life just kind of going back and forth in this U-shaped burrow. And they will come up to this end and they will try and capture prey, small crustaceans, you know, whatever happens to be going around this end. And then they will scuttle back and often they will leave a fecal mound, which kind of looks like, I've heard it described as looking like toothpaste, but it's toothpaste if the toothpaste were made entirely out of sand. And that's because you can imagine being a worm, not having hands or any way of separating out your food item from the beach that you live on. You do end up ingesting a lot of sand. So they will eat their food, digest it, and then they'll kind of poop out the sand at the other end. And it actually ends up kind of effectively cleaning the sand in a sense. So they'll move back and forth, come up here to hunt. And often folks will use lugworms for bait, and they'll look for these fecal mounds and they'll use those to kind of identify where the mound is. And then you might have to sit and wait by the fecal mound to see, well, where does the head pop up? And that gives you a sense of where you need to like plunge your shovel in and quickly excavate out the lugworm so you can go put it on a fish hook and try and catch yourself some big game fish. Okay, another type of sedentarian is a feather duster worm. This is a worm that you might encounter if you were out like diving at a coral reef. They produce a leathery tube which they live inside and they can withdraw into. And then they will typically have one or more of these projections called radioles. That they use to aid in filter feeding. So if you're diving along, you might see these kind of weird Christmas tree looking things sticking out that are very highly dissected, very fringy looking. And then as you swim by, they might suddenly disappear into this leathery tube, which is the habitat for the feather duster worm. And then when they're feeling confident and hungry, they might stick the radioles out again and use those to capture small bits of prey, plankton, things floating in the water column. So that's your feather duster worm as a member of the Sedentaria. So these two down here are sedentarians. Our Pololo worm is an errant polychaete.